purpose is there for string cheese? It's barely
Nourishment.
edible.
It tastes good.
It doesn't. It does not taste good.
Well, Ken, what's new in your world?
What's new in my world? I think I'm going to go on a date with my wife tonight to see a movie.
What are you gonna see?
Ooh,
I'm hoping that we're going to go see Anatomy of a Fall. I think it's a French movie that won the Palme d'Or at Cannes Festival last spring.
Uh,
Um,
that's
it's a criminal trial about whether a woman killed her husband or not, and it's supposed to be a really great movie.
okay. You
Either
just
that or Taylor Swift.
well, you sound a lot more sophisticated than I was prepared for this afternoon. So that's
I'm
good.
not actually very sophisticated. Um, it's the end of my week teaching, and I'm not planning to do any grading this weekend, even though that I could get a bunch done. And um, yeah, the new thing for me is that we figured out how my retirement is going to happen.
Say more.
Well, our institution, Grandview University, has is the recipient of a huge grant from the Lilly Foundation. We're going to establish the Iowa Preachers Project, and I'm going to direct it. And so I will retire from full-time teaching at the end of this semester and do a phase down and teach half time next semester, and the other half of my time I'll direct that program. And then at the end of this school year, I'll just do the preaching program half time,
that
and
sounds
that'll
great.
be my retirement years.
That
That's
sounds
great.
great.
And speaking of preaching, Ken, we are on the eighth of these 9.5 theses that we have been talking about.
Yeah, really,
So,
it's just 10. It's really 10 theses.
but number eight says um, only preachers who have suffered under the judgment of the law and been freed from it by the proclamation of the gospel are able to hand on what they were first given to people in similar straits. So first, Ken, I'd like you to um, break break this thesis up for someone who might not understand what you're saying there, and then I'd like to.
We don't want to let Johanna just start with quibbles,
Quibbles.
No, I want you to
qualms.
translate it. I want you to translate it,
Quibbles.
and then we can move to her quibbles.
I feel like we should call it something more dignified.
Um,
But you don't like
uh,
quibbles?
Objection.
rebuttals, rebuttals.
Better. Better.
Well, this
So
thesis,
break it down.
What
um,
does it mean to suffer under the judgment of the law?
it means to have your conscience troubled, which isn't much better, is it, Johanna?
I mean, I guess it depends on what you mean by conscience. But
Well, there
before
you
we go
go. I mean,
there,
it's an important word, though. Martin Luther used conscience frequently in talking about how the gospel works, and usually when we think about the conscience, what people the default image of it is Tom and Jerry cartoons, where you've got the little devil on one shoulder telling Tom to do something stupid, and the angel on the other shoulder telling him not to do it. And we think that's what your conscience is, just this inner voice, you know, weighing temptation of some kind. I'll just show quickly that I have classier brand of fuzzy water than Jason does.
very nice.
But
That one
really,
is nice. I
what
like
your
it.
conscience is is not about temptation at all. It's about your sense of who you are in relation to the other. Okay, at least as Luther talked about it, that your conscience is about who you are, coram deo, in Latin, literally in the face of God, or I think we could say vis-a-vis God, right? That your conscience tells you if something has gone awry with that relationship. And the same thing is true of your relationship with your fellow human beings and with the world itself, right? And that if you've come under the law, you have had your conscience troubled because the law has accused you somehow of not, as we say in Western South Dakota, not having your turds in a herd. That you don't have your act together, that you haven't met the mark somehow. That the law always tells you what you should do, and more importantly, holds up a mirror to you, like Dr. Phil, and says to you, well, how's that working out for you? And generally speaking, the answer that we have to respond with is not so well at
So
all.
part of what you're saying, I think, is if proclamation is to be an existential address from God to the listener,
Define
you,
existential for me, quick.
the God is speaking to you in a way that brings about some sort of crisis, requiring faith. But if preaching is going to be that, the preacher first has to have experienced that themselves.
Yeah, or another way of saying it is that you have to be dead and gone. The control that and security that you've so carefully wrought has to somehow be wrenched away from you. Um,
Can we,
Dr. Hartelius,
yeah. So can we go back? What is okay, so conscience and law. Is the conscience that you have, so for example, is the conscience that I have different even when it tells me everything is fine or something is off? Is that different from what you were describing as coming under the law?
I'm not sure I understand your question, Johanna.
So you were saying your conscience can let you know whether you are sort of as you ought to be vis-a-vis God, right?
Yeah, I think we maybe should say that your conscience does that, but that the law says that God uses what God has created, both the things of the creation and the order and structure of the creation, including relationships and societies, that those things tell us where we stand.
Okay.
um,
Is
go ahead, Jonah.
um I sort of lost my train of thought, but it's sort of the are you saying that God's law works through your conscience? So basically, is conscience an internalized law? And if so, is that a good thing or not?
Well, I don't want to. The if I've come under the law, I want to describe something that is an experience that we might have of the law.
Yeah.
That we something is happening in your life that that you lie in bed awake at night and you think it just kills me that this is happening because it's not right, it's not working, you know. I've argued with my wife, and ignored the free advice that people have given us to never go to bed mad and lie there in bed angry. But I'm there and I don't know how to fix it because what's gotten in the way is simply who I am, and that I'm the problem, and that I'm the problem in so many ways. That whether it's my carbon footprint or that there are parts of my job that just I seem to be constitutionally unable to stay on top of. That the gospel always comes to people who who are dying or dead. You know, that's every encounter that Jesus has with other people in the gospel. Somehow is with a person that that has come to an end somehow, that has, I don't know, gotten to the end of their rope and found themselves unable to hang on at all. And the point of the thesis is that, that's how God has chosen to work. It is by going after those who no longer operate under their own power or have seen the folly of self-security and self-regard and self-promotion and for whom life just ain't working anymore. The what we have, the witness that we have in the Gospels and Acts and throughout Paul's letters is that those are the people who actually come to faith, and that if you haven't gotten to that, well, use your word, Jason, that existential break somehow, a break in the self, and heard the gospel proclaimed to you somehow in the face of that, as remedy of that, then what you will do is you'll turn the gospel into what Paul calls in Galatians just another gospel, not that there is one, right? That you'll turn it into something that promotes itself as the gospel, but isn't actually a word that can kill and make alive.
So what is the what happens in between? And Jason, you can speak to this too. What happens in between those two events, which is the word I'm choosing kind of intentionally, that so having been given that, let me see the word that you're using. Having first been given that, and been freed, what is the translation, or not necessarily that, but what happens in between event 2 and 1, where 2 is giving it onward to people in similar straits?
You wanted Jason to talk to that?
Either one.
No, you go, Ken.
No, I'm willing to let you do it.
I don't know that I have an answer, so I'd like to hear what you say first.
It's what you're asking about, Johanna, is, well, what happened to Lazarus?
Yeah.
After Jesus called him out of the tomb, right?
Yeah.
that he was dead, and then this word came from his friend that said, "Get up," and presumably he opened his eyes and said, "What are all these bandages around my head?" or something, and then went out and lived.
He's probably like, I smell really bad.
Yeah, well, it's like that book, Lamb, the Gospel According to Christ's Childhood Friend Biff, by do you know that book?
No, but I want to get
Oh,
it
it's
now.
so great. It's oh
It sounds like Life of Brian, but different.
Christopher Moore is the author,
Hmm.
and it's really quite delightful. It actually uses a whole bunch of stuff out of the Gospel of Thomas as the narrative of Christ's childhood as well, and in it after the resurrection or something, or before he starts his ministry, Jesus goes to India and gets Buddhism or something. It's just it's very clever. But in the raising of Lazarus, Jesus has to yell at him a couple times to come out, and finally you hear this voice from in the tomb that says, "I can't. I'm icky." Um,
Not
at,
presentable. I think
at any rate, though, Lazarus didn't have any choice at that point to live. That he had been proclaimed alive again on account of Jesus, and that 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 is it's a great, I think, analog for what happens when preaching comes to people who are under the law, who've experienced that condemnation and judgment and death.
I,
Um, Go ahead, Jason.
I was just thinking that you know what you're getting at in this eighth thesis is that it, to be a practitioner, you first have to have been a patient.
Definitely.
Um, and a lot of preaching maybe obscures the way in which uh, you were dead in your trespasses. That preachers model good behavior, not struggle under the text or the judgment of the text. And then I think they make a different mistake in once that word has brought Lazarus to life, thinking that what will keep Lazarus alive is a different word. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
That, so that in the context of preaching, the word that raises Lazarus to life, come next Sunday, Lazarus is back in the grave again, more likely than not.
Yes.
And
Can you
needs
say
the
more about
same.
what that? So, just like I think I hear you, but at the same time, can you say more about what you mean by that?
That the gospel is for Christians too. That I think. I know I've made. That's where I've suffered under the judgment, and thinking that the word of the cross is how you make someone a Christian, and then once they become a Christian, you give them commandments and advice and moralism, and then
Okay.
that's and then that's how they grow
Yeah, yeah.
in sanctification.
Or
When
in other words, you give them advice
mhm.
for how to live, which is not a word that actually gives life necessarily. That that there are words that can do this and words that can't.
Yeah, and
And
and I think one of the things you're not saying in this thesis that uh, someone who has not suffered under the judgment of the law cannot deliver a sermon. You're not saying that because
Right.
obviously anybody can do that. But you are saying that if you, as someone who is going to proclaim, is going to hand over the goods of the gospel, you have to have received it yourself first.
But also
Yeah,
too,
or maybe another way of saying that is that there's all kinds of things that you can say in front of people that are good words, but they're not necessarily the gospel.
right.
Hmm.
They may be words that make you an interesting orator
Not that there's anything wrong with being an interesting orator.
or an entertaining personality, also not necessarily that there's anything wrong with that. I've been watching videos of this. I think she's an Irish comedian. Sarah Millican is her name. And she just has a way with words and cleverness about the human condition and kind of a foul mouth as well. In what seems like a very meek and oh nice accessible package, and then she gives you all this other stuff that just Mary and I watch Sarah Millican videos before bedtime, and just we laugh about it because it's so clever. And people can do that,
It's like West Wing.
but um, yeah. Um, I'm going to take a quick break here because something looks like is happening with my cam.
Don't
Okay.
don't
What?
leave.
I'm not leaving. I'm just
We
switching
can
the
hear you.
camera. You can
Um,
hear me, but can you see me?
No, we can see like what looks like sort of like Stonehenge, but with trees.
Yeah, that would be Cedar Henge.
But
uh,
so I have a question though. It seemed like what y'all were saying about how if you're going to give over the goods, if you're going to deliver the good news, it presumes that the good news has been gifted to you and proclaimed to you in word, like the word of
yeah,
the cross. But then that seems like it obscures two things. One is if you hadn't been, why would you want to deliver anything that looks anything like like why are you preaching at all? Like it seems like if you haven't been given the goods, what interest would you possibly have in delivering like a public service announcement about the Bible? Like that just seems so incredibly
Oh, there are
meaningless.
all kinds of
Not to like,
reasons why somebody would do that,
but
Johanna. I
and
mean, it's
secondly,
because.
if you
Go
have
ahead.
if also like when you have been, how could you not? So it seems
hmm
like either one of those realities are on both sides of this if then claim.
I was just thinking, Ken. Um, so like in church life, I will often hear people say things like, "Oh, that sounds like a sermon," or "There must be a sermon in there," and invariably, what they're talking like they're equating um, a sermon with a story formed piece of morality or
Mm.
advice.
Hmm.
Um, just yesterday, I think, or Tuesday, I met with someone at church who said, I just want to hear a sermon that gives me advice on how to be a kinder person. I'm like, and
Oh,
I get it.
I can give that speech. Here's how it goes. Be nice.
No,
but
here's what I would
but
say:
but, but then like
get it from someone other than Jason. There are way nicer people. I'm just saying, like,
I know.
I don't want advice about niceties from Jason Micheli.
no, I don't
I
either.
know him well enough.
Or really from
Okay.
the pulpit in general. Like, I don't care if
he has
like
no expert he has no expertise on niceness or
I mean, so
morality. But
I
Johanna, you were asking about why would somebody get up in front and give something, right? Provide some kind of speech. And there are all kinds of motivations for that. right?
Hmm.
And a lot of times, and we've seen this in colleagues or classmates, that um, they're they're in this calling because it meets some other kind of need for them of status or power or control. And
Yeah.
often when those are the motivating factors, you wind up with preachers that that don't know the gospel from a bale of hay in the middle of the road.
Yeah. No, and I let you say that. I feel really terrible about having put it that way. Um, I think that you like, yes,
Jason
of
could probably
course.
tell you how to be a better person.
But I think, and I did not, I, nothing could be further from the truth than me being flippant about this. I'm not trying to make it silly, but I think the perspective that I'm coming from as someone in the pew is, if I didn't believe that this is true, I would stop going to church immediately. Like I would
Yeah.
not go ever again. I only go because of that. Like, so why would you, so that reflects my question.
Well,
She,
and
she,
and
she,
that is such an important question for call committees in
mhm,
congregations, right? That Martin Luther said in a treatise called "On Whether Congregations May Call and Dismiss Pastors." He said that the primary task of lay people in the church is to judge doctrine. That
mhm.
is, they need to have a well honed theological BS detector.
Yeah, and
And
that's what I was getting at.
and that when you're when you're engaged in a call process, that that call committee, some and the congregation as a whole really needs somehow to determine whether this person who's being called actually has Jesus on their lips and is ready to bestow that on others because they're compelled to do it because they've been freed by that very word.
Mm.
And so you have to you need to dig in a call interview with a candidate for a position in a congregation as
It,
pastor or preacher.
and this is important because, like what I was saying before, lay when lay people talk about what a sermon is, what they have in mind often is not a sermon. It's not preaching,
It's Aesop's fables.
and 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 then part of that too is so like like Luther's commentary on Galatians when he's talking about Paul's encounter with the risen Christ. Luther talks about how only those who have been likewise gripped by Jesus should be preaching.
Knocked on
Um,
their keisters by the risen Jesus.
that yeah, because it requires. I mean, I know it requires the discipline and the faith to not always give what people want.
I,
If that makes
I
sense.
confess that there have been times where I stood in the pulpit and there was somebody in the pews that I was just pissed at and wrote a sermon that I thought they couldn't possibly miss what God demands of them in how they ought to shape up their lives. You know, that I was out to fix people and have God's praise for fixing their horrible morality or piety and then on the way out of church, they shake my hand and say, "Oh, Pastor, thank you. My sister so needed to hear that." You know,
But I think
the
it matters what makes this discourse singular, or like uh, what's the word? Um, Anyway, it'll come to me maybe. Um, Sui generis, like it's one of a kind, right? That because there are forms of discourse that you could engage in that may or may not be well received, like a lecture in a class. People are like, "Oh, that sucked," like class today sucked. That happens, not to me, obviously, but no, definitely to me. But so having the courage to deliver something that might not be appreciated, that's true, but that's not distinctive. So I think the distinctive part can be more fully articulated in terms of, is it is it being received from elsewhere while it is being delivered by someone in in the pulpit.
Yeah, I mean, it's the difference between like me giving you advice on how to be a kinder person. It like is not going to make you a kinder person. Me giving you Jesus just may make you a kinder person because he might be able to do it.
Right, right. No, that's
Um,
right. And it's important.
and I think preachers need to think carefully about who their audience is, and whom this word is aimed at.
Mm,
That the assumptions that you make about one's hearers are crucial in understanding this. I mean, we'll use your language, Johanna, this speech event,
mm.
right? That that you simply have to imagine that your audience is dead people,
Yeah.
dying people, actual real life sinners, okay, and not people who are ready to do moral transformation.
Well, this, but
And
also, yeah, I was thinking,
because really the preacher needs to ignore all of those people and zero in on somebody. You don't know who it is ever at any given moment. I mean, there may be somebody who's come to you and says, "I'm really troubled," but like as not, you won't know that. But you have to preach as though somebody is sitting in the pews, somebody is in front of you who is at their wits' end for how to not be them. I mean, in essence, when I have a troubled conscience or the law is weighing me down, what I'm feeling is I'm so effing sick of Ken Jones.
yeah, no,
You
I think
know,
that's true too.
why can't I get myself clear of not just my history and my ill deeds and my ego, but my very self that keeps getting into the middle of things? That there's somebody sitting in the pews who knows that, and 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 for whom a word of mercy, and a scatological word of mercy, breaking out of the future, saying, "This is what you have in store for you. This is what is promised to you," um, is is the cutting of the shackles
And
and the loosing
the
of the bonds.
um, Jason was saying that you telling someone to be a kinder person isn't going to make them a kinder person. And because I recently thought a lot about teaching philosophies and talked to our new grad students about that, I've been, there's an obvious non-sameness uh, between the practice of teaching, like whatever it is that I'm saying or however I'm planning a course, and the learning, which is something that is done by another person, like the person, I'm hoping that they happen together, but they don't always. Because that other person has to be participating and they have to, they, like, that is a different, I can't control whether learning is happening, as it turns out. But to Jason's point about, if you preach the good news, if you preach the gospel, that word does make anew the one to whom it is given, in a way that the preacher is just sort of a conscripted participant in, right? But not
Hmm.
your it's not your word, and the word as it arrives, right, does make new. And I love that the word make keeps popping into our conversation, because this my hobby horse of, like, why not translate I will make you fishers of men into more inclusive language, because the word make is the key word, right? That it's, I will make you completely anew from anything that you were before, and none of that will matter. So don't say, like, I will, what is it? I'll
Let's
make you
go fish for
for
people.
people. Yeah, oh my God. Yeah, so it's like, I will help you fish for people. Like, I don't want that.
And
Yeah.
Ken,
There's a Shield Sporting Goods just off exit 83. Go get yourself a rod and reel.
I was thinking, that part of this too informs not just what you say, but how you say it, right? And I was thinking of that anecdote about Wittgenstein and Drury walking past a street preacher, uh, shouting at people, and Wittgenstein commenting on the as they walked away that, if he really believed what he was saying, he wouldn't be shouting that way, and that, that there's too much preaching where the tone of voice and the body language and the facial expression, like, it all, none of it conveys any sense of truth or urgency, or what I'm about to tell you is the most important thing in the world. Does that make sense?
Hmm.
That it's staid and calm and and safe. Maybe those are
There,
the wrong
there's,
adjectives.
I think safe is a perfectly good word to describe that. There's a song in My Fair Lady where Eliza Doolittle sings to Henry Higgins, about words, words, words. I don't want words anymore. Show me, you know, give, and I think what she's after there is kind of Jacques Ellul's humiliation of the word, that she's encountered words that are meaningless, that
Hmm.
don't have power, and she wants something that actually transforms her, or even better, transforms the relationship that she has with Henry Higgins.
Yeah,
And
I mean,
I think we often do that with God. Give me something that can change this relationship. Don't just keep giving me advice for how to be more spiritual, how to be more religious, how to have better understanding of the Bible, or have my kids turn out, or whatever. Don't give me that stuff, because I've tried all that. I've been spending 64 years of my life trying to cobble together a life, and the only real life that I've ever experienced, the rich, abundant life that Jesus promises, the only time that I've ever had that is when it's come at me in spite of myself, when it's dropped in my lap,
hmm
and that the gospel functions that way, I think. It does that. It is external and it is a living and active word.
Yeah, I was just, the like, on either end, there's, like Fleming Rutledge's, the way she preaches is almost with the solemnness of someone presiding at the sacrament. She's
Hmm.
not ostentatious at all, but she's serious. And then at the other end, like a charismatic preacher, and it's almost like everything in between misses the mark of those two poles. Um, that if yeah, I just
Do you think, Jason, that it's because both of those ends of the pole uh, um, have the highest regard for what is happening
yes,
at that moment? That
yeah,
that 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 they have an expectation that God is actually going to do something here,
hmm
and that it actually hinges on what's going to come out of my mouth,
hmm
and that I'm bent somehow on not just being the delivery vehicle for it, but that I be intimately connected and simultaneously receiving that same thing
Hmm.
as I'm doing it, which
hmm
means that I love both those preachers on either side of that. You know,
I've I've
I
been
would.
in a sanctuary where, and it's a priest that I appreciate, not my favorite preacher, but but good. And it was, I remember the sermon, though I don't remember the topic or the really the anything else about it.
I bet
But
it
I do
was
remember that.
Jesus.
Right, I got it.
Okay.
The toward the end, it was like the preacher, she knew that it was going well. She knew she had done well. And but at the same time, there was a clear sort of sense of surprise in her and in the congregation, as though like something in something got weird, but in an amazing way. So just kind of like we were looking around being like, what just happened? Because this,
Yeah.
it worked, like look what happened. And then it was over. But I like that it has a kind of like visitation feel to it. Like she was happy, but like a little bit surprised.
hmm yeah. That I had so I can remember almost word for word, but definitely move for move, a sermon I heard Dave Davis preach in Princeton Chapel, you know, 23 years ago, on First Samuel. Um, the title of which was "What About Uzzah's Mother?" And the urgency of that question, uh, it animated the room. It's the best sermon I've ever heard in my life. And then what you're talking to, Joanna, like the the thing I liked at my previous church about doing 4 services, and preaching 4 times every weekend, was you could see that like sometimes it really does like catch fire in the room, but not always.
Mm.
Um, so like the realness of it means that it's not always going to happen.
And
Just
to take it
thinking.
back to the thesis, like I want to look at it again. Um, Able to hand on what they were first given. I think that when I have been present for either sermons or sort of ritual liturgical practices that seem void, like seem empty. Um, they're
I
me,
apologize for those.
dude. It's not about you. Um, it they seem so empty, and it's been multiple occasions when the emptiness of it makes me so incredibly sad that I like have to leave the room and like go to the ladies room and cry. And then like there's a part of my thought process that's like, I'm just a crazy person, like that's fine, this is fine, it's okay, like chalk this up to your own craziness. But I don't think that that's quite it. Like I'm willing to concede a certain level of that, but it's quite possible because it feels like a death, right? Like it's just, we're all here, and then this,
I
like
think I think
it's tragic.
Johanna, in those moments, I mean, you're not a crazy person. I think it's because you understand what Alcoholics Anonymous talks about in, what is it, step 4, that we did a fearless and searching moral inventory, that you have dared to gaze into the depths and and found the terror of what's there, and that you too know the desperation of needing something beyond that when you encounter that in yourself, and you want a preacher who gets that, right? And
And
I was just at 1517's Here We Still Stand conference um, last weekend in San Diego, and they were looking at C.S. Lewis, and there was this quote that I encountered that I'd never heard before. That I think I sent to you, Jason,
mhm.
from the Four Loves, where he talks about friendship. I just have it on my phone here in front of me. Friendship is born at that moment when one person says to another, "What, you too? I thought I was the only one." You know, that those moments where the sermon goes right, and you're there, and there's this moment. It's this connection that happens then between the preacher and the hearers, where they're going, "You too? I thought I was the only one. You know, am I the only one that is desperately clinging and hoping against hope for this thing?" And the when the preacher can't find it in themselves to 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 bring me that, then I get indignant. I don't
Yeah.
go to the bathroom and cry. I just get up and go get a drink of water or something, and then I bitch and moan about it in the car all the way home to my poor wife.
Either one
I,
is fine.
I related to this, I think, Ken, because it's All Saints Sunday, so I've been thinking about, you know, that, the New Testament teaching that the body of the risen Jesus are it's the body of believers gathered around the loaf and the cup. Like that's mysterious, right? And that, like, well, if this is Jesus, then all of the dead are gathered here with us too, present and available to it. Like, and I was thinking of like Paul's instructions for the Eucharist to the Corinthians. He doesn't say, like, as we read in the Gospel of Matthew, or as the apostles like kind of like shared it with me. He says, as the Lord handed on to me, that Saint Jesus, as it were, gave this practice to Paul to give to the Corinthians. And so, like, the more I think about things like that, and then I like Malachi 4, the idea of like Elijah coming again and converting the generations that have come before. That there's a mysteriousness to the faith that I feel like we've almost been taught to look the other way when it pops up in these texts. Um, and 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 so there's too much Christianity where it treats this as like the most obvious thing in the world, when the claims of the faith are cosmic and astonishing and mysterious and just upending.
And
Am I making any
counterintuitive.
sense at all?
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. It's a preposterous notion, the whole thing.
And what's amazing is that like the astonishing claims are just the straightforward reading of these scriptures too. like you
But
have to
here-
misread them.
I mean, and that's maybe where we're being grounded in doctrine, well grounded in doctrine, which really is just simply the 2 millennia long experience of the church, right? Of how we find language for what God has done and continues to do among us, right? That 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 good preaching is informed by this thing that has been happening over and over and over and over again, from
Yeah.
one set of lips to another set of ears, across millions of relationships, billions of relationships now, right? That 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 preaching moment of the person who has received it handing it on again not only is about that fleeting moment, where your preacher did this thing, Joanna, and then it was gone, but that very moment has it tied you to the saints throughout the history of the church, but also to those who this host arrayed in white, that's in Revelation that you've been preaching about, Jason. Who are these? They're the ones that have washed their robes in the blood of the Lamb. That when you get that, it's tied you to those saints in history and in eternity, so that you can say with both those groups, what, you too?
Mm-hmm.
I thought I was the only one, you know.
Yeah.
And
The thing
there's such comfort in being tied to that. That I face the vagaries of my existence every day, all day long, and the impermanence of what my culture puts in front of me, and to sit in the pew this Sunday and look at our altar rail that's a half circle, and to know that there's another half of the circle that all the saints are kneeling at with me,
ooh, I'm going to steal that.
because they too see, we just had this liminal moment.
Can I
Let's stop for a
so
second, right, and recognize that this was
so
holy just now. But
because I had another one. I interviewed this guy yesterday about Anglican theology, and that was all fine. But at the end,
he had such pretty blue eyes.
when I asked him, "What do you want to hear God say when you arrive at the pearly gates?" He said, "This is going to hurt." The event of being put right by God is going to hurt, and it was seeing on his face, like, shit, like he really believes this. Like that was like a
Well,
like
I
a,
mean,
a like
that's exactly what
an arresting moment.
that's Chronicles of Narnia right there.
I know.
Is it Edmund who becomes the dragon, right? And
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
Aslan has to tear the dragon
Yeah.
scales off him, and it's gonna hurt. And
Yeah, he's such a
it's
dark
exactly what
character.
you just posted about recently on your stack thing about hell, that of hell being God finally separating you from your sin. That and you didn't talk about it this way, Jason, but you know that great Reformation phrase, simul justus et peccator, at the same time, saint and sinner, that what happens on the last day is the final rending, the tearing away
Mm,
of the old
that's good.
person in me, and that will be horribly painful for that old person in me, but it is going to be such a relief for the new Eve and the new Adam. You know,
Simul no more.
yeah, the symbol will be done. Um, what, Johanna?
I'm I'm rolling my eyes at Jason trying to show off.
But you know, I mean,
But
this
but
is the kind of
I think
conversation that with our Lily funded preaching project that we're going to start in January, is that these are the conversations that I want preachers to have, to say,
yeah.
Hmm.
how does this work? What exactly happens when the gospel is preached? And that there's this incredible delight in being able to banter with somebody else who gets this. I have these long text chats with my friend Ryan, who's a pastor in Southeast Iowa, and that we just start spinning with these ideas of what's going on in this passage from God's Word, and how does that work, and how does it connect to Jason Isbell's songs, or to this movie, or you know, this book that we've read, and to our own awful history and whatever, you know, that it just becomes the last part of this thesis. Then I think actually the next thesis is the one that talks about what a delight it is.
Hmm.
Is that right? That um, at that moment, I mean, is there anything more fun to do than to be that
No.
preacher? Johanna had to go to her thing, um, but you know, I mean, it was this experience that I had preaching in chapel on Tuesday this week for All Saints Day here on campus, and that between the sermon and the All Saints reading of, you know, about 4 dozen names of people connected to this community who have died, you know,
Hmm.
to tie ourselves to those that are gone, and then to know that it's that word that just came to us somehow. Um, it's just this. It's a remarkable moment.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
What's our thesis for the next one of these?
Let me pull it up. Number 9 is faithful preaching assesses its effectiveness not by worldly results, but recognizes the preached word as a planting of God's promise that will grow unseen in those in whom it is planted.
And that's where I was going to go next, just in our conversation today, to talk about how um, preachers just need to decide to do it,
Hmm.
to have the guts to actually speak mercy on account of Christ freely,
Yeah,
without
and
considering
you know,
whether it's effective or not. So
yeah, it's
that's next time.
were you faithful is a better.
Yeah, exactly. Is that
I
it
think
for us? I mean,
I
can we? Do you want to do more without Johanna?
no.
I don't.
I was just
Never
thinking.
do.
I think maybe it's John Bear. I read the quote about we call them passages of scripture because if you like hide yourself like Moses in the cleft of the rock and wait patiently with the text, the Lord will pass through it.
Ah, nice.
Hmm.
I like that. That's nice.
Well,
Yeah.
it's nice. It's nice to see you.